Welcome back. We're going to step into adding more functionality to our applications by using event handlers. But before we do that, we need to know what event handlers are. And to really talk about this, we're just going to look at events in general and what sort of events we can work with, how we go about handling events, and then we're going to really hone in on what the most useful events are that we can utilize. So the first thing is, when we talk about events, there are a few things we need to know. They kind of get broadcast out there. So something will emit an event and other things can listen to them. They're identifiable, so there's going to be some unique name that allows you to identify an event so that you can get more information and even handle things in a more fine-grained way than just by what type of event it is. And then the object itself contains a lot of other information that might be useful to you, such as where it's located on the screen, or if it's something like a key press event, what key was actually pushed. When we go about handling events with a tkinter application, it's really not too complicated. We're going to be mostly working with one of three methods: the bind, bind all, and bind class. And these all basically do the same thing. The big difference here being at what level of your application you're binding. So for instance, bind all is going to have everything bound. So if you bind all and click to your root object, then you can click on any widget inside your application and it's all going to be routed and listened for by the root element. The bind method is going to be the way that you bind something to an individual label or a button that you add on screen. And then bind class is going to allow us to do something similar, but you're going to bind it to every new instance of the class that is created. So looking at how we actually bind the events, we can see right here that we are using the bind method. And then the first portion here is the name of the event. So this is going to be button 1. This is going to be a left click of your mouse. And then the second argument there is going to be the actual event handler that needs to be run. And the event handler is up above. You'll notice that it takes an event as an argument, that we've set it to none. And this is just kind of a practice that is good to use because then you can use event handlers as both event handlers, but then also command handlers if you're working with buttons. So that's something handy to get used to doing. When we talk about the actual events that we're working with, there are a lot of them. So we're just going to go through these here. So we have button events. These are going to be single clicks of your mouse. And this is going to correspond to left, middle, and right. And the middle button is kind of a weird one. Older mouses used to have like a third finger button right there in the middle. So that's what the button 2 is going for there. But button 1, button 3 are going to be the most common ones that you're going to use. Then you get into kind of modifiers on those. So button release 1 is going to be when you let go of the button after you've clicked down with your left mouse button. We can get even further into this. You can say double button 1, 2, or 3. This is going to be a double click. And then you get into very specific ones that are easy to use. So enter inside of brackets here, which is going to be inside of a string as you're binding here, is going to reference when something crosses over the boundary of your widget. So this is when you hover. So this would be called a mouse in event sometimes. And then leave is going to be the opposite. It's going to be when your mouse leaves. So this would be mouse in or mouse out, depending on other paradigms that you're used to working with, such as web development. We have focus in and focus out, and this is when you gain focus or lose focus by tabbing around. So when you hit the tab button, it's going to change the focused element on the page. This usually puts a little kind of dotted border around it, and this event triggers when you focus in or when you tab away from something that you had focus on. So now we get into the more interesting ones if you're trying to build something that's really complicated, but you have key inside of the less than and greater than is going to be any key press. The R here, the capital R, is just an example. And this would be if you wanted to bind to somebody legitimately hitting Shift R. And then the lowercase r is the equivalent just if somebody just hit the R key by itself. So you'll notice that when it's a very specific key like that they don't go inside of the less than or greater than signs. Some keys are a little bit harder to work around and they actually get their own special name for them. So return, backspace, tab, and then your arrow keys all get their own corresponding thing because you can't just type out a tab character with ASCII, really. It doesn't work out because it's a non-visible character. And then we also have space and less. I really don't understand why space is a lowercase s, but it's something that you need to get used to. And then the reason that less than gets its own custom one here is because that so many of these things start with the less than character that it would be really hard to parse that out if you just typed a less than character as a string to say if somebody hits this key. But the greater than character, nothing is ever going to start with a greater than character and be a different type of event. So that's why that's the way it is. These next group of events are kind of interesting because they look so odd, but this is going to be the way that you represent meta characters by themselves. So this is just typing the modifier keys. So Shift, Control, Alt, and Meta. And the _L there, I don't actually know what it means, but you'll see in our next group that if you wanted to say Shift L, you would actually use a dash instead of an underscore. But if you just wanted to say when somebody pushes the Shift key, then it's going to be this Shift _ L event. If you want to actually say when somebody modifies a key, so pushes Shift L or Alt L or Control L, then you're going to use a dash in between. And then configure is a special kind of event that is triggered when you resize a window or a widget and the location changes somewhere. So these are a lot of events, and you're going to figure out the ones that you use most often as you're building things. But for the most part, you think about what you do with an application. You're going to be clicking just a single click. You're going to right click occasionally. And then if it's something where you can type in and out, you'll figure out the different events that you use as you're trying to tab through a form. And do you want something to happen when they tab off of one field onto another one? So these are good ways that we can kind of sprinkle in more functionality or just improve the user experience for the applications that we're working on by using these events. We're going to learn how to use these as we actually get into a demo in the next lesson.